What starts as a routine traffic stop turns into a high-stakes showdown between Officer Jack Preston and Senator David Warren, a man who thinks his power puts him above the law. Jack stands firm, but his decision sparks a media storm, public backlash, and a deeper battle for justice. As corruption unravels and secrets come to light, Jack must fight to clear his name and expose the truth. Will he succeed against a powerful politician, or will the system crush him? Let us know your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more thrilling stories of truth and justice. The late afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the small town of Millfield. Officer Jack Preston sat in his patrol car, parked on the side of a quiet stretch of highway just outside of town. It had been a slow day, a welcome relief after the string of late-night disturbances that had rocked the town over the past few weeks. His eyes scanned the horizon lazily, his radar gun resting in his hand, its quiet beeps barely noticeable. Jack had always appreciated the quieter days on the force. They gave him time to think, time to reflect. He was proud of his work had been since the day he put on the uniform. Millfield wasn't a dangerous town, but it wasn't without its problems. Jack liked to think he played a role in keeping it that way, safe, predictable, and free of the chaos that plagued bigger cities. The highway in front of him was mostly empty, just a few cars here and there, none in a rush. He let his mind wander, thinking about the weekend ahead. Emily, his wife, had been talking about taking a day trip with their daughter, maybe to the lake. Jack smiled to himself, thinking of their little family, far removed from the stress of work. Just as he was settling back into his seat, the radar gun beeped sharply, pulling his focus back to the road. He blinked at the screen 90 MEP. A sleek black sedan sped past him, far exceeding the 60-minute limit. Jack's instincts kicked in immediately. Without hesitation, he flicked on his cruiser's lights and pulled onto the road, accelerating to catch up to the car. The sedan responded almost instantly, slowing down and pulling over to the side of the road. Jack felt a slight pang of relief. He'd dealt with enough high-speed chases to know how dangerous they could be, even on a calm stretch of highway like this. He ran the plates as he approached. Everything came back clean. The car was registered to a David Warren. The name didn't ring any bells at the moment, but that wasn't unusual. Jack stepped out of his cruiser and approached the driver's side window, his hand resting lightly on the grip of his service belt. The window rolled down smoothly, revealing a man in his late 40s, wearing an expensive suit. He had salt and pepper hair, neatly styled, and a calm but dismissive expression as he spoke into his phone. Jack cleared his throat. "Good afternoon, sir. Do you know why I pulled you over today?" The man didn't even look up, still talking into his phone. "Yeah, just give me a minute," he said, waving Jack off with one hand. His voice was smooth, practiced a man who was used to being in control. After another few seconds, he ended the call and finally turned to Jack, his expression indifferent. "What is it?" Jack remained professional, his tone even. "You were clocked going 90 in a 60 MEP zone, sir. You'll need to see your license and registration." The man sighed, clearly annoyed. "Speeding, huh?" He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out not a driver's license, but an official-looking ID card. Jack's heart sank a little as he glanced at the card, Senator David Warren. Now the name clicked. "Do you know who I am?" Warren asked, his voice filled with an air of entitlement. Jack kept his face neutral, nodding slightly. "I do, sir, but I still need your license and registration." Warren stared at him for a moment, as if trying to gauge how serious Jack was. After a long pause, he muttered something under his breath and reached into his wallet, pulling out his driver's license. He opened the glove compartment with a flick of his wrist and handed over the registration papers as well. Jack took the documents without a word and returned to his cruiser. He ran the license and registration, finding everything in order. As he filled out the speeding ticket, he felt a familiar sense of unease settle in his gut. He had dealt with people like this before, people who thought their status or position could get them out of anything. Jack wasn't about to let that slide, but he knew issuing a ticket to someone like Senator David Warren could stir up trouble. Still, the law was the law. Jack finished writing the citation, fully aware that this was only the beginning of something much larger. As Jack finished the ticket, he heard the sound of a car door slamming. He looked up to see Warren storming toward his cruiser, his face a mask of frustration. "You're really going through with this?" Warren demanded, stopping just a few feet from Jack's door. "Do you know who I am? I've been in politics for years. I've done more for law enforcement than you can imagine." Jack stepped out of his cruiser, his expression calm but firm. "Sir, you were speeding. This is a straightforward ticket. You can contest it in court if you'd like." Warren stepped closer, his voice rising. "You've got some nerve, Officer Preston. I know Chief Harris personally. I've helped secure funding for your department. You really think you're going to give me a ticket after everything I've done?" Jack didn't flinch. "Sir, I'm just doing my job. You were going 90 in a 60 mph zone. That's a violation of the law." Warren's face flushed with anger. He pulled out his phone, dialing quickly and turning away from Jack. His voice shifted, taking on a smoother, more controlled tone as the call connected. "Chief Harris, it's David. Yeah, I've got an issue here. One of your officers is writing me a ticket. Can you believe that? Yes, Officer Jack Preston." He glanced back at Jack with a smug expression. "Over a speeding violation." Jack stood quietly, waiting for the inevitable conclusion. He knew Chief Harris well enough to know the man would back him up, but there was always a chance this could go sideways. Warren listened to the other end of the call, his smile fading slightly. I know I've been a huge supporter of the department. I figured you'd want to handle this before it gets out of hand." There was a pause, and Warren glanced at Jack again, the smugness returning to his face. "The chief wants to speak with you," he said, extending the phone toward Jack. Jack didn't take it. "He'll call Chief Harris later if needed. Right now, I'm finishing up your citation." Warren's smile dropped, his face tightening. He put the phone back to his ear, his tone filled with irritation. "Chief, he's refusing to talk to you. I think we've got a bigger issue here." Jack could hear the tension in Warren's voice, but he remained focused. He'd been through this before. The law didn't change because of someone's status, and he wasn't about to let Warren intimidate him into backing down. Warren finally hung up the phone, his eyes narrowing at Jack. "Chief Harris expects you to reconsider this," he said, stepping closer. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm just reminding you of everything I've done for your department." Jack didn't budge. "Sir, the ticket stands. You were speeding, and that's a violation of the law. If you feel it's unfair, you can contest it in court." Warren's nostrils flared, his fists clenching at his sides. "You don't understand how this works, do you? You're making a big mistake here. You think writing me a ticket is going to fly. You'll regret this. Mark my words." Jack looked him in the eye, unflinching. "Sir, please return to your vehicle." For a moment, Warren didn't move, his chest heaving with barely controlled anger. But then he noticed something. Cars passing by on the highway had started to slow down. A few drivers were pulling out their phones, recording the confrontation. Warren's eyes flickered with recognition as he realized he was being filmed. He scowled at Jack, muttering under his breath, "You don't know who you're messing with." Jack watched as Warren finally backed off, returning to his car. He opened the door, got in, and slammed it shut with enough force to make the windows shake. Jack approached the car one final time, holding the ticket out. "Here's your citation, Senator. You can contest it in court. Drive safely." Warren snatched the ticket out of Jack's hand and sped off, the tires kicking up gravel on the side of the highway. Jack stood there for a moment, letting out a slow breath. He knew this wasn't the end of it. Warren wasn't the type to let something like this go quietly. But Jack had done his job, and he wasn't about to let Warren's threats shake him. Still, as he returned to his cruiser, a sense of unease settled over him. Trouble was coming, and it was coming fast. The next morning, Officer Jack Preston sat at his kitchen table sipping coffee as the early sunlight filtered through the blinds. Emily, his wife, stood by the counter, flipping through a newspaper, oblivious to the storm that was brewing outside their quiet home. Jack's phone buzzed on the table, interrupting the moment of peace. A flurry of notifications lit up the screen more than he had ever seen at once. Curious, he picked up the phone, his heart sinking as he opened the first message. "Hey man, is this you on the news?" Jack frowned. He quickly navigated to the video attached to the message. As it played, he felt his stomach drop. It was the footage from the traffic stop with Senator David Warren, but only part of it, carefully edited to make Jack look like an overly aggressive cop. In the video, Warren appeared calm and collected, while Jack's serious demeanor made him seem cold and unyielding. It didn't show the senator's condescending attitude or the way he'd tried to intimidate Jack with his political connections. The video had been posted on social media, and it was already going viral. Comments flooded in, many of them harsh and critical of Jack's actions. Another cop on a power trip. Can't believe they treat public figures like this. Disgusting. This officer should be fired. Emily glanced over at Jack, noticing the change in his expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, moving closer. Jack handed her the phone, unable to find the words. She watched the video in silence, her brow furrowing as she scrolled through the comments. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, handing the phone back. "They're not even showing what really happened." Jack sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "That's the problem. No one cares about the whole story. They see what they want to see." Before he could say more, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from the station. Jack stared at the screen for a moment before answering. It was Chief Michael Harris. "Preston, we need to talk," Chief Harris said without preamble. His voice sounded strained, like he'd been dealing with a long night of headaches. "You've seen the video, right?" "Yeah, I've seen it," Jack replied, keeping his tone steady. He knew where this conversation was going. "Well, it's everywhere. The mayor's office is getting calls, and it's only getting worse. We need to handle this quickly." Jack's jaw tightened. "Chief, I did everything by the book. Warren was speeding, plain and simple." "I know, Jack. But this isn't about the ticket anymore. This is politics." Harris paused, lowering his voice. "Look, the mayor wants you on administrative leave while this blows over. You understand what that means, right?" Jack felt a knot tighten in his chest. Had expected something like this, but hearing it still hit hard. "So, am being punished for doing my job." "Not punished. It's just temporary until things settle down. We can't risk more negative attention right now." Jack closed his eyes, trying to keep his frustration in check. "Fine. I'll pack up my things." "Preston, don't think of this as a setback. We'll clear this up, but right now we need to be careful." "Understood, Chief," Jack replied, keeping his voice even. He hung up and placed the phone face down on the table. Emily stood there, arms crossed. "What did Harris say?" Jack stared down at his cold cup of coffee. "I've been put on leave." Emily's face twisted in disbelief. "They're blaming you for this." Jack nodded. "Looks like it." Emily sat beside him, her hand resting on his arm. "This isn't right, Jack. They can't just—" "They can, and they are," Jack interrupted, his voice thick with frustration. "Warren's got friends in high places. They're going to protect him at all costs. Meanwhile, I'm the one who looks like the bad guy." Emily squeezed his hand. "We'll get through this. People will see the truth." Jack wasn't so sure. He had seen how quickly narratives spun out of control, and the video already had thousands of views. The truth was buried under layers of public perception, and the more it spread, the harder it would be to dig his way out. Later that day, Jack returned to the station to hand over his badge and gun temporarily. The process was routine, but felt anything but ordinary to him. His colleagues tried to avoid eye contact, the awkwardness palpable. Jack knew that some of them sympathized with him, but none of them dared say anything aloud. In a small-town police department like Millfield, stepping out of line could cost more than just a job. When Jack reached Chief Harris' office, he knocked lightly before stepping inside. Harris was sitting behind his desk, looking even more exhausted than he had sounded on the phone. "Preston," Harris greeted him with a heavy sigh. "I hate that it's come to this." "So do I, Chief?" Jack placed his badge and service weapon on the desk. "But I understand." Harris stared at the items for a moment before leaning back in his chair. "This is just a formality. I don't think for a second that you did anything wrong. But Senator Warren, he's not just some guy. He's got the mayor's office on his side, and they're calling this harassment. They're threatening to drag the department through the mud if we don't act." Jack remained standing, his arms crossed over his chest. "I was doing my job. He was speeding, breaking the law." Harris nodded. "I know that. But this isn't about what's right. It's about optics. Warren's got connections, and he's spinning the story his way. People are already calling it a case of police overreach. Jack's jaw clenched. What about the body cam footage? We're reviewing it, Harris said, though his tone suggested it wouldn't be released anytime soon. But the mayor's office wants to keep this quiet for now. They think releasing the footage will only fuel the fire. Jack shook his head. So, I'm just supposed to sit at home while they make me look like the villain. Harris exhaled, leaning forward in his chair. I know it's not fair, but we need to let this blow over before we can make any moves. If we push too hard now, Warren will take this to the press and well lose control of the narrative. Jack's fists tightened. We've already lost control of the narrative. Harris didn't argue. He simply nodded, his face etched with regret. I'm sorry, Jack. I really am. Jack left the office without another word, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like a heavy stone. He had done everything right, and yet here he was, on the outside looking in, his career hanging by a thread because of one man's arrogance. The days that followed were a blur of media coverage, online outrage, and growing frustration. Everywhere Jack turned, his name was in the headlines, and none of it was good. Senator David Warren claims harassment by Millfield officer. Police misconduct at the hands of Officer Jack Preston. Senator calls for investigation into overzealous officer. Jack sat on the couch, watching the news coverage with Emily by his side. Every major network seemed to be running the same story. The clips of the traffic stop, taken from passing cars, played on a loop, each anchor narrating their own version of events. None of them mentioned the full story, and none of them cared to dig deeper. Emily scrolled through her phone, reading the comments on social media. This is insane, she muttered, shaking her head. Half of these people don't even know what they're talking about. Jack sighed, his eyes still glued to the screen. Doesn't matter. They've already made up their minds. He had tried to stay off social media, but it was impossible to avoid completely. The comments were brutal, filled with people calling for his resignation, demanding an investigation into his conduct. They didn't care about the facts, they only cared about the narrative Warren had built. This can't go on forever, Emily said, her voice tinged with frustration. At some point, the truth has to come out. Jack didn't respond. He wanted to believe that, but he knew better. In the world of politics and public perception, the truth was often drowned out by louder voices, and right now, Warren's voice was the loudest. As the days dragged on, the pressure continued to mount. Jack couldn't leave the house without being recognized. Reporters camped outside, hoping to catch him for a statement. Neighbors stared at him with pity, and he could hear the whispers as he passed by. At night, he lay awake, his mind racing with thoughts of what could happen next. Would the department turn against him? Would Warren's influence be enough to ruin his career for good? Emily tried to comfort him, but even she could sense the growing tension in the air. Their quiet life in Millfield had been shattered, and there was no telling when or if it would ever return to normal. A week after the incident, Jack received a call from Detective Sarah Mitchell, one of the few people in the department who hadn't shied away from him since the controversy started. Jack, I've been looking into this whole thing, Sarah said as soon as he answered the phone. There's something off about Warren. Jack frowned, his interest piqued. What do you mean? I've been digging around, and there's more to Warren than just his political connections. He's got a lot of skeletons in his closet money issues, shady dealings with local contractors. It's all rumor for now, but if we can find proof, it could change everything. Jack leaned back in his chair, a spark of hope lighting in his chest. You think this has something to do with the traffic stop? I don't know yet, but I wouldn't be surprised. Warren's the kind of guy who's used to getting away with things. If we can expose him, it might turn the tide in your favor. Jack considered her words, a sense of purpose returning. Keep me posted. I want to know everything. Will do, Sarah replied. Hang in there, Jack. We're going to get to the bottom of this. As Jack hung up, he felt a renewed sense of determination. He wasn't out of the fight yet. The following morning, Jack sat at the kitchen table again, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee. The house was quiet, save for the distant hum of the refrigerator and the occasional chirp of a bird outside. It was the calm before the storm, he could feel it. His phone buzzed on the table, rattling slightly against the wood. Jack glanced at it, expecting more messages from old friends, or perhaps another notification about the ongoing media frenzy. But this time, it was a message from Detective Sarah Mitchell. "Meet me at the station. We need to talk." Jack felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He hadn't been back to the station since his forced leave, and returning there felt like walking back into a battlefield. But if Sarah had something important to share, it was worth the risk. He grabbed his jacket and headed out, his mind racing with possibilities. When he arrived at the station, it felt surreal-like stepping into a familiar place that no longer belonged to him. His colleagues avoided eye contact as he passed, and a few muttered quiet hellos, but no one stopped to talk. The weight of the controversy was evident in every tense face and hushed whisper. Sarah was waiting for him in one of the empty conference rooms. As soon as Jack entered, she shut the door behind him, her expression serious. "We need to release the body cam footage," Sarah said, cutting straight to the point. Jack nodded. "I've been saying that for days. But Harris won't let it go public." Sarah leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Harris has his hands tied. The mayor's office is pressuring him to keep it under wraps, saying it'll make things worse. But we both know that's not true." Jack clenched his jaw. "So what are we supposed to do? Just sit back and watch while Warren spins the story his way?" "No." Sarah slid a USB drive across the table. "This is the footage. The full thing. I managed to get a copy from the review committee." Jack stared at the drive, the weight of it suddenly heavier than it appeared. This was it, the truth. The proof that could exonerate him and finally put Warren in his place. "We leak it," Sarah said, her voice steady but firm. "An independent journalist I know has been asking for it. We give it to her, and she'll make sure it gets out there. Once the public sees the real story, they'll turn on Warren." Jack hesitated, his mind racing. "If we do this without the department's approval, it could come back on us. Harris will be furious." Sarah shook her head. "Let him be furious. You're about to lose everything because of a man who thinks he's above the law. Are you really willing to risk your career, your reputation, your family future, just to avoid rocking the boat?" Jack stared at the USB drive, the room around him feeling smaller and smaller. He had always followed the rules, done things by the book. But the rules hadn't protected him. Warren's lies were spreading like wildfire, and every day that passed, Jack's name sank deeper into the mud. He picked up the drive, his fingers curling around it. "Let's do it!" 2 days later, the truth exploded onto the internet. The independent journalist, Nina Flores, released the full body cam footage on her website, along with a detailed report on the incident. The video was raw, unedited, and undeniable. It showed Jack walking up to Warren's car with professionalism and calm, asking for license and registration. It showed Warren's dismissive attitude, his arrogance as he flashed his Senate ID and demanded special treatment. But most importantly, it showed Jack remaining calm as Warren stormed out of his car, jabbing his finger at Jack's chest and threatening to call the police chief to have him fired. It captured everything: the disrespect, the intimidation, and Warren's blatant attempt to use his power to escape accountability. Within hours of the footage being posted, it went viral. Thousands of comments flooded in, but this time the tone was different. The narrative was shifting, and the public began to see Jack for what he truly was: a cop doing his job in the face of a powerful man's threats. "I can't believe Warren acted like that. What a disgrace. Officer Preston handled this like a pro. Mad respect. This is why people don't trust politicians. They think they're above the law." Justice for Preston trending now. Let's get this man his job back. Jack sat at his kitchen table, watching the comments roll in on his phone. Emily hovered behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder as they watched the tide turn. "It's working," Emily said softly, her voice filled with a mix of relief and disbelief. "People are seeing the truth." Jack nodded, but the tension in his chest hadn't fully released. The truth was out there, but Warren wasn't the type to back down easily. He knew that this was only the beginning of a larger battle. As expected, Warren didn't stay silent for long. Less than 24 hours after the footage was released, the senator held a press conference, standing in front of a group of supporters, his expression calm and collected. "I want to address the recent release of body cam footage from the traffic stop involving myself and Officer Jack Preston," Warren began, his voice smooth, every word carefully measured. "First, let me say that I have the utmost respect for law enforcement. I've been a proud supporter of our police for years, and I believe in the rule of law." Jack watched the press conference on the TV, his fists clenched at his sides. "However," Warren continued, his expression hardening slightly, "what happened that day was more complicated than what's shown in the footage. Yes, I was frustrated. Yes, I reacted poorly. But I want to make it clear, I was not asking for special treatment. I was asking for respect, which I felt was lacking in that interaction." "Unbelievable," Emily muttered, shaking her head. Warren went on, spinning the narrative further. He claimed that his outburst had been taken out of context, that his frustration stemmed from being treated unfairly, and that he had no intention of using his influence to escape the ticket. Jack felt the knot in his stomach tighten. Warren was trying to rewrite the story yet again, painting himself as a victim of circumstance. But Jack knew the truth. The body cam footage had spoken for itself, and now it was up to the public to decide who they believed. Despite Warren's best efforts, the tide of public opinion was turning against him. News outlets that had previously run with the narrative of police misconduct began to backtrack, issuing statements acknowledging the full footage and its implications. But the real blow came from Detective Sarah Mitchell's quiet investigation. While the body cam footage had exonerated Jack in the public eye, Sarah's work had uncovered something far more damning for Warren. It started with whispers rumors about Warren's financial dealings, his connections to local contractors, and suspiciously large donations to his campaign. Sarah had spent weeks digging through records, tracing the money back to shady business deals that Warren had tried to keep hidden. Now she had the proof she needed. Late one evening, Sarah called Jack, her voice breathless with excitement. "Jack, we've got him. Warren's been funneling money from state contracts into his personal accounts. It's all here, bank records, emails, everything." Jack's heart raced. "How solid is it?" "Solid enough to bring him down," Sarah replied. "This isn't just about a traffic stop anymore. Warren's been using his position to enrich himself, and now we can prove it." Jack leaned back in his chair, the weight of the past few weeks finally lifting just a little. "We need to get this out there." "I'm already on it," Sarah said. "This is going public first thing tomorrow." The next day, Sarah's findings hit the news like a bombshell. Every major network was running the story. Senator David Warren, the man who had painted himself as the victim of police overreach, was now at the center of a corruption scandal. The headlines were brutal. Senator Warren's shady dealings exposed financial misconduct rocks the state Senate. Corruption scandal unfolds. Senator Warren accused of embezzling state funds. From hero to villain, the downfall of Senator David Warren. Jack watched the news with a sense of grim satisfaction. Warren's lies were unraveling faster than anyone had anticipated, and now the man who had tried to destroy Jack's career was facing a far greater reckoning. Emily sat beside him, her hand resting on his arm. "Looks like Warren's in real trouble now." Jack nodded, though a part of him remained cautious. "It's not over yet. He's not the type to go down without a fight." Jack Preston sat in his living room, his eyes glued to the TV. The once dominating image of Senator David Warren, confident and powerful, now appeared cracked and fragile on the news. The corruption scandal had taken over every media outlet. Sarah's investigation had exposed Warren's involvement in illegal dealings, revealing how he had funneled state money into private accounts, paying off contractors to keep his wealth hidden. News reporters were no longer focusing on the traffic stop. Instead, every anchor was discussing Warren's corruption, his betrayal of the public trust, and the possibility of criminal charges. Jack wasn't just relieved he was vindicated. It wasn't just a victory for him as a police officer, it was a triumph of truth. The camera zoomed in on Senator Warren, standing at the podium outside his office for what was being framed as an impromptu press conference. His face, once smug and unshakable, now wore deep lines of stress. Warren still tried to maintain his calm, composed facade, but the weight of public scrutiny had clearly gotten to him. "These allegations against me," Warren began, his voice measured but tense, "are completely unfounded. I have served this state with integrity for years, and I have never engaged in any illegal activities. These accusations are politically motivated, aimed at undermining the good work I've done for this community." Jack watched, unmoved. He had seen Warren lie with that same smooth voice during their confrontation at the traffic stop, and now he was doing it on a grander scale. But the public wasn't buying it this time. Warren's words were met with a barrage of questions from reporters, none of them showing him the deference they once had. "What about the financial records showing money being funneled into your personal accounts?" one reporter asked. "And how do you explain the emails from contractors admitting to paying bribes to secure state contracts?" another shouted. Warren's composure faltered for a moment, but he quickly tried to recover. "I will not dignify these baseless accusations with a response," he said, his voice sharp. "This is a smear campaign orchestrated by those who want to see me fail." The cameras captured every crack in his demeanor, every moment of strain as Warren fought to keep control of the narrative. But it was clear he was losing. The footage, the records, the email sit was all out there now, and there was no spinning his way out of it. As the scandal deepened, Jack could feel the weight that had been pressing down on him for weeks finally begin to lift. The public wasn't just turning on Warren, they were rallying behind Jack. Social media was flooded with posts praising Jack for standing his ground during the traffic stop, and for doing his duty despite the powerful figure in front of him. Justice for Preston was trending nationwide, with thousands of people sharing the body cam footage alongside their support for Jack's professionalism. Officer Jack Preston did his job and stayed calm, even when this corrupt politician tried to bully him. "We need more cops like him." Senator Warren thought he was above the law, but Officer Preston showed us what integrity really looks like. "I used to respect Warren, but after seeing the full footage and these corruption charges, I'm glad Officer Preston stood his ground. He's the real hero here." Emily sat beside Jack on the couch, scrolling through the posts and smiling softly. "People finally see the truth," she said, her voice filled with quiet satisfaction. "They know you did the right thing." Jack nodded, though he still felt a cautious tension in his chest. He had won in the court of public opinion, but Warren wasn't the type to go down quietly. There was still the question of what would happen next, whether Warren would be charged, whether Jack would be fully reinstated, and whether the department would apologize for putting him on leave in the first place. Still, it felt good to know that the world saw him for who he truly was, an honest cop, just trying to do his job. The next morning, Jack received a call from Chief Harris. There was something different in his voice, something that sounded like relief, or maybe even pride. "Preston," Harris began, "I've been watching the news. Looks like things are finally turning around." "They are," Jack replied, keeping his tone steady. "It's about time people saw the truth." Harris sighed. "I've spoken to the mayor. We've reviewed all the footage, and with everything coming out about Warren, it's clear that we made a mistake putting you on leave. I'm reinstating you, effective immediately." Jack felt a wave of relief wash over him. He hadn't realized just how much he'd been holding on to the fear that his career might be over, even after the truth came out. Hearing the words "effective" immediately lifted a weight off his shoulders. "Thanks, Chief," Jack said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I appreciate that." "There's more," Harris continued, his tone softening. "The mayor's office is issuing a formal statement clearing your name, and they'll be holding a press conference later today. They'll make it clear that you were acting professionally throughout the entire incident. I know this doesn't make up for what you've been through, but it's a start." Jack nodded, though there was still a lingering bitterness in his chest. It was good news, but part of him couldn't shake the feeling that this could have been avoided. If the department had trusted him from the start, if they hadn't caved to political pressure, none of this would have happened. "Thank you," Jack said again, his voice firm. "I'll be at the station tomorrow." Harris paused for a moment before replying. "Take the rest of the week, Jack. You've earned it." A week later, Jack returned to the station, his badge once again clipped to his uniform. The atmosphere was different this time, lighter, more supportive. His colleagues greeted him with handshakes and nods of respect, and even those who had kept their distance during the controversy seemed to be glad to have him back. Jack could tell that they had all watched the news, seen the footage, and read the reports. The entire department knew that Jack had done the right thing, and now they treated him like the hero he had become in the public eye. As Jack settled back into his routine, he found a sense of normalcy returning. The chaos of the past few weeks faded into the background, and he once again became just an officer doing his job, keeping the peace, protecting the town, and upholding the law. But something had changed in him. He was more aware now of the fragility of the truth, how easily it could be twisted and distorted by those with power. He had always believed in the system, in justice, but now he knew how quickly that system could turn on someone, even when they were in the right. Emily had been his rock through it all, and as they sat together on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the neighborhood, she squeezed his hand and smiled. "You did it, Jack," she said softly. "You got your life back." Jack smiled, though it was tinged with a quiet sadness. "Yeah, but it doesn't change how fast things turned. One moment, I'm doing my job, and the next, I'm on leave, watching my name get dragged through the mud." Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. "But the truth came out in the end. You didn't let them bully you. That's what matters." Jack nodded, his eyes focused on the fading light of the sun. "It does matter, but it's hard to forget how close I came to losing everything." They sat in silence for a while, the quiet evening air settling around them. The world had righted itself, but Jack knew that the experience had left its mark. A week after the corruption scandal broke, the pressure on Senator David Warren had become unbearable. Every day, new revelations surfaced, further proof of his financial misdeeds and unethical behavior. Warren's allies in the state government were deserting him, scrambling to distance themselves from the unfolding disaster. Jack Preston watched the coverage with a mixture of relief and quiet disbelief. It was still surreal to him that only weeks ago he had been at the center of a media firestorm, facing public backlash for simply doing his job. Now the tables had turned. Warren's political career was in freefall, and Jack's name had been cleared. One afternoon, as Jack sat at his desk in the precinct, sorting through routine paperwork, his phone buzzed. It was an alert from one of the local news stations. "Breaking! Senator David Warren resigns amid corruption scandal." Jack stared at the headline for a moment, letting the words sink in. Warren had finally caved under the weight of the scandal, stepping down from office in disgrace. There was no dramatic press conference, no tearful apology, just a short, carefully worded resignation letter that was released to the public. In the letter, Warren claimed he was stepping down for the good of the people and to focus on clearing his name. It was a hollow statement, one that rang false to anyone who had been following the story. But in the end, it didn't matter. Warren was out, and his once powerful career was in ruins. Jack took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair. It was over. Really over. That evening, Jack sat on the couch with his wife, Emily, watching the news coverage of Warren's resignation. The anchor's voice was calm but pointed as she recounted the series of events that had led to this moment. Senator David Warren's resignation comes after weeks of mounting pressure following revelations of financial misconduct and a broader corruption investigation. The fallout from the scandal has been swift, with multiple state officials distancing themselves from Warren and his political allies, remaining silent in the wake of the controversy. The screen showed clips of Warren's last few public appearances, his face drawn and tense, his confidence shattered. The man who had once believed himself untouchable had finally been brought down by his own hubris. Jack felt Emily's hand squeeze his. He looked over at her, seeing the relief in her eyes. "It's really over," she said softly. Jack nodded, though there was still a lingering weight in his chest. "Yeah, it is." For weeks, they had been living under the shadow of Warren's influence, unsure if the truth would ever come out. Now that it had, there was a sense of closure, but also a quiet realization of how close Jack had come to losing everything: his job, his reputation, his peace of mind. Emily shifted closer to him on the couch, resting her head on his shoulder. "You did it, Jack. You stood up to him, and now everyone knows the truth." Jack smiled, but it was tinged with exhaustion. "I just did my job." "No," Emily replied, her voice firm but gentle. "You did more than that. You didn't let him push you around. You didn't back down, even when it got tough." Jack sighed, his gaze returning to the TV. "It's hard to believe it's finally over. After everything we've been through, part of me was starting to think Warren would just keep getting away with it." Emily sat up and looked him in the eye. "But he didn't. You stopped him." Jack nodded slowly, allowing himself to finally accept that truth. It wasn't just the body cam footage or Sarah's investigation that had brought Warren down, it was Jack's refusal to let Warren's power intimidate him. He had stood his ground, even when the odds were stacked against him, and in the end, that had made all the difference. The next day, Jack received a call from Chief Harris. Jack had spoken to Harris several times since being reinstated, but there was something different in the chief's voice this time, something more personal. "Preston, I'd like you to come by the office," Harris said. "There's something we need to talk about." Jack agreed, though he had a feeling he knew what the conversation would be about. When he arrived at the station, Harris was waiting for him in his office, standing behind his desk with a serious expression. "Jack," Harris began, motioning for him to sit down, "I wanted to speak with you face to face about everything that's happened." Jack sat down, his gaze steady. "I'm listening." Harris took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology. When this whole thing started, I should have had your back from the beginning. I should have trusted you and fought harder to release the body cam footage. Instead, I let the pressure from the mayor's office and Warren's influence sway my decisions. That was a mistake, and I take full responsibility for it." Jack remained silent, letting Harris' words sink in. It was rare for a superior officer to admit faults so openly, and Jack appreciated the honesty. "I know it doesn't change what happened," Harris continued, "but I want you to know that you have my respect. The way you handled yourself under all that pressure, with your reputation on the line, it showed me what kind of officer you really are. And it reminded me of the kind of leader I need to be." Jack nodded, finally speaking. "I understand the position you were in, Chief. I know it wasn't easy for you either. But I hope moving forward we can make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen to someone else." Harris' expression softened. "Agreed. I'll do everything I can to make sure the department learns from this. And Jack, if you ever feel like your back's against the wall again, you come to me. I've got your back from here on out." Jack stood, offering his hand. Harris shook it firmly, and for the first time since the ordeal began, Jack felt a sense of closure. There was still work to be done, still trust to rebuild, but this was a start. In the weeks following Warren's resignation, the media coverage slowly began to die down. The corruption investigation continued, with more names being implicated, but Jack's involvement in the story had come to an end. He was no longer a focal point of the headlines. Instead, he returned to his normal routine at the station, picking up where he had left off. One evening, as Jack and Emily sat on their porch, watching their daughter play in the yard, a quiet sense of peace settled over them. The storm had passed, and their life was finally returning to normal. "I'm proud of you, you know," Emily said, her voice soft in the fading light. "I know I've said it 100 times, but I really am." Jack smiled, his gaze on their daughter as she chased fireflies in the yard. "I couldn't have gotten through it without you." Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. "We got through it together, and now we can finally put it behind us." Jack nodded, but there was still a part of him that couldn't let go of the lessons he had learned. He had seen firsthand how fragile the truth could be, how quickly the powerful could twist it to suit their own ends. He had faced the dark side of the system he believed in, and while he had come out victorious, the experience had changed him. But it had also strengthened his resolve. As the sun set behind the trees, casting long shadows across the yard, Jack knew one thing for sure. He would continue to do his job with the same integrity he always had. He wouldn't let the experience make him cynical or bitter. Instead, he would use it as a reminder of why he became a police officer in the first place: to serve, to protect, and to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. And if he ever found himself facing another powerful figure like Warren, he would be ready. A month after Warren's resignation, the state officially charged him with multiple counts of financial misconduct and fraud. The once powerful senator who had tried to bully Jack into submission was now facing the full force of the law. It was a bitter irony, one that Jack couldn't help but appreciate. As Warren's trial date approached, Jack received a letter in the mail from a legal team representing the state. It was a request for his testimony at the trial, chance to finally confront Warren, this time in a court of law. Jack read the letter carefully, then placed it on the kitchen counter. He wasn't sure yet if he would testify, but the thought of standing in front of Warren one last time, knowing that the senator's power had been stripped away, was tempting. But for now, Jack was content to let the legal system run its course. Warren's fate was no longer in his hands. Justice would be served, and Jack could finally move on. Months after the dust had settled, the trial of David Warren began. It was a media spectacle as expected, with every news outlet in the state following each development closely. The courtroom was packed with reporters, cameras flashing as Warren, once the untouchable senator, sat behind the defense table in an ill-fitting suit. His face was pale, his demeanor subdued, a far cry from the arrogant, confident man who had once tried to intimidate Jack during a routine traffic stop. Jack hadn't wanted to attend the trial at first. He felt like his chapter in the story had already closed, and he was ready to move on. But as the trial date drew closer, he realized that this wasn't just about seeing justice served, it was about closure. He sat in the gallery, quiet and observant. Detective Sarah Mitchell had been called to the stand earlier, her testimony solidifying the financial misconduct charges. Her investigative work had been key to the case, uncovering the intricate web of bribery, money laundering, and fraudulent state contracts that Warren had been involved in for years. As the prosecution presented its final pieces of evidence, Jack felt a sense of satisfaction. The justice system, for all its flaws, was working. Warren was no longer shielded by his power or his connections. Now he was just another defendant facing the consequences of his actions. When the prosecution rested its case, the defense attempted to argue that Warren had been misled by his advisors, that he had no direct knowledge of the illegal activities. But it was a weak defense, and everyone in the room could see it. The jury deliberated for less than a day before returning their verdict guilty on all counts. As the judge handed down the sentence years of imprisonment and heavy financial penalties, Jack allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The man who had tried to bend the truth to fit his own narrative had been brought down, not just by the law, but by his own arrogance. When the trial was over, Jack quietly slipped out of the courthouse, avoiding the reporters who were eager for a comment. He didn't need to say anything. The verdict spoke for itself. The next day, Jack found himself back in his patrol car, driving down the same stretch of highway where his confrontation with Warren had taken place. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the road, the landscape calm and quiet. He glanced at the radar gun resting beside him, its soft hum a comforting reminder of the simple tasks he'd always enjoyed about the job. It felt good to be back on the road, far from the media attention, the courtroom drama, and the political games that had consumed his life for the past several months. Jack had been through a lot since that fateful traffic stop, and the experience had changed him. He was more cautious now, more aware of the fine line between doing what was right and navigating the political pressures that sometimes came with the job. But he hadn't lost his resolve. If anything, he felt more determined than ever to uphold the law and protect his community, no matter who tried to stand in his way. As he drove, his phone buzzed with a message from Emily. It was a simple text, but it brought a smile to his face. "Dinner's ready whenever you are. We're having your favorite. Love you." Jack typed back a quick response, "Be home soon," before setting the phone aside and returning his attention to the road. The town of Millfield stretched out before him, peaceful and familiar. The tension that had hung over his life for so long was finally gone, replaced by a quiet sense of satisfaction. He had faced one of the most powerful men in the state and come out the other side stronger, surer of who he was and what he stood for. Jack's thoughts drifted to Chief Harris and the changes he had promised to make within the department. Since the trial, Harris had kept his word, implementing new policies that would prevent political pressure from interfering with police work in the future. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a step in the right direction. Jack was proud of the work they had done together, and proud of the department for standing by him when it mattered most. But more than anything, he was proud of himself for not backing down, even when it seemed like the whole world was against him. That evening, as Jack sat down for dinner with Emily and their daughter, the weight of the past few months finally began to lift. They had weathered the storm together, and now they could focus on rebuilding the life they had before Warren's corruption had thrown everything into chaos. Emily placed a plate of Jack's favorite meal-grilled steak with roasted vegetables in front of him, smiling as she sat down across from him at the table. "Feels good to be back to normal, doesn't it?" she asked, her tone light. Jack nodded, cutting into his steak. "Yeah, it really does. I almost forgot what normal felt like." Their daughter, Maya, who had been quietly coloring at the table, looked up and smiled at her dad. "Are you going to have to go back to court again?" Jack shook his head, reaching over to ruffle her hair. "Nope, no more court. It's all over now." Maya grinned, clearly relieved. "Good. I didn't like all those reporters coming around." Emily laughed softly, glancing at Jack. "Neither did I." Jack smiled, feeling a sense of contentment wash over him. For so long, he had been focused on getting through each day, just trying to survive the media storm and the pressure from Warren. Now that it was over, he could finally breathe easy. As they ate, Jack and Emily talked about the future plans for a family vacation, projects around the house, and dreams they had put on hold while everything else had been going on. For the first time in what felt like ages, they could think about the future without the cloud of uncertainty hanging over them. Later that evening, after Maya had gone to bed, Jack and Emily sat on the porch, watching the stars twinkle in the clear night sky. The air was cool, and the quiet of the neighborhood was a welcome change from the chaos they had endured. Emily leaned her head on Jack's shoulder, and for a moment neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. The peace between them was enough. The days that followed were calm and uneventful, just the way Jack liked it. He returned to his routine at the station, working alongside his colleagues to keep the town safe. The scandal surrounding Warren had finally begun to fade from the public consciousness, replaced by the next big story. For Jack, that was a relief. He was ready to move on. Detective Sarah Mitchell, now a rising star in the department thanks to her role in exposing Warren, stopped by Jack's desk one afternoon. She leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed and a grin on her face. "So, you ready to get back to normal, or are you still waiting for the next big drama?" Sarah asked, her tone teasing. Jack chuckled. "I think I've had enough drama for one lifetime, thanks." Sarah nodded, her expression turning more serious. "You did good, Jack. Not everyone would have handled things the way you did. You stood up to him, and that takes guts." Jack smiled, grateful for her support. "Couldn't have done it without you. You were the one who found the evidence that took him down." "Team effort," Sarah said, giving him a playful salute before walking away. As Jack watched her go, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in the work they had done together. They had stood up to a powerful man, exposed the truth, and made sure that justice was served. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. In the end, Jack had learned that integrity mattered more than anything. It was easy to lose sight of that when faced with threats and pressure from people in power. But Jack had never let himself forget why he became a police officer in the first place. He was there to protect and serve no matter the cost. And now, as he looked ahead to the future, he knew that whatever challenges came his way, he would be ready. He had faced the worst, and he had come out stronger. If you enjoyed Jack Preston's story of resilience, justice, and standing up for what's right, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel by subscribing. You'll never miss another story of courage and integrity where the truth always comes out in the end. What did you think of Jack's journey? Should he have handled things differently? Or did he do the right thing all along? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And as always, stay tuned for more thrilling stories of real-life heroes, moral dilemmas, and the fight for justice. Subscribe now and join us on this journey, because everyone deserves to hear the full story. He had the tools, the support, and the vision to keep pushing forward. He wasn't just changing his own life, he was helping to change the lives of countless others. As he looked out at the twinkling lights of the city, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace. The fight for equity, for inclusion, for a fair shot at success, this was his legacy. And it was only just beginning. Thank you for joining Marcus Wright's incredible journey. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more inspiring tales of resilience, empowerment, and change, make sure to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future stories. Together, we can continue to explore powerful narratives that inspire, challenge, and uplift. Let's keep building a community of change. See you in the next video. As Daniel and Sophia left the Harper estate that night, hand in hand, they knew that this was a turning point. They had faced so many obstacles, both external and internal. Now, with Robert's reluctant acceptance, they could finally begin to build the future they had always dreamed of. Months passed, and the town of Greenwood began to see Daniel and Sophia in a new light. Their resilience, their determination to be together despite the odds, had earned them the respect of many who had once judged them. Slowly, the whispers and stares faded, replaced by nods of acknowledgement and even smiles of approval. As the summer approached, Daniel and Sophia decided that it was time to take the next step in their relationship. After everything they had been through, they knew that they didn't want to wait any longer to begin their life together as husband and wife. One warm evening in late June, Daniel proposed to Sophia in the same place where they had first reconnected, the town's little park by the river. It was simple and intimate, just the two of them under the stars, with Daniel down on one knee and Sophia's heart racing as she said yes through happy tears. They decided to keep the wedding small, inviting only close friends and family. It wasn't about impressing the town or proving anything to anyone. It was about celebrating the love that had carried them through the hardest times of their lives. The day of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the sunlight casting a golden glow over the town. The ceremony was held in the very church that had once been a source of tension for Sophia and her family. But now it felt like a place of peace and new beginnings. Sophia stood at the back of the church, her heart fluttering as she looked down the aisle at Daniel, who was waiting for her with a smile that made her feel like the most loved woman in the world. Madison stood beside her, beaming with pride, while Connor and the younger children fidgeted excitedly in their seats. As the music began to play and Sophia started her walk down the aisle, she felt a wave of emotion wash over her. This moment, this beautiful, perfect moment, was the culmination of everything they had fought for. It was a testament to the strength of their love and the power of their commitment to each other. When she reached Daniel, he took her hands in his eyes filled with love and admiration. "You look beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia smiled, her heart overflowing with happiness. "You don't look too bad yourself." The ceremony was simple and heartfelt, with Margaret reading a passage about love and unity, and Madison stepping up to give a short, tearful speech about how much Daniel meant to their family. "I used to think we didn't need anyone," Madison said, her voice shaking with emotion. "But Daniel showed me that it's okay to let people in. He's been there for us in ways I never thought anyone could, and I'm so grateful he's a part of our family now." There wasn't a dry eye in the church as Madison finished her speech, and even Robert, sitting in the front pew, looked on with a softness in his eyes that no one had ever seen before. When the minister finally pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel and Sophia shared a kiss that felt like a promise that would carry them through whatever challenges the future might bring. The reception was held at the town's park, with twinkling lights hanging from the trees and a live band playing in the background. It was a celebration of love, family, and community. And for the first time, Daniel and Sophia felt truly at home in Greenwood. As the night wore on, the laughter and music filled the air, and Daniel and Sophia danced under the stars, their arms wrapped around each other, their hearts full. "I can't believe we're here," Sophia whispered, her head resting on Daniel's shoulder. "After everything, we made it." Daniel smiled, pulling her closer. "We did, and I wouldn't have it any other way." As they swayed to the music, surrounded by the people they loved, Daniel and Sophia knew that their journey wasn't over. There would still be challenges, still moments of doubt and hardship, but they also knew that they had something unshakable, something that could weather any storm. They had love, and that, they realized, was more than enough. Daniel and Sophia's journey had been one of struggle, heartbreak, and resilience. They had faced judgment, rejection, and the weight of their pasts, but through it all, they had discovered the true strength of their love. In the end, it wasn't the opinions of others or the approval of society that defined their happiness, it was their unwavering belief in each other. With their family by their side and a future filled with hope and possibility, Daniel and Sophia stepped into the next chapter of their lives together, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, because they knew, without a doubt, that love would always guide them home. A year after their wedding, Daniel and Sophia sat together on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of orange and pink. The cool evening breeze rustled the leaves of the trees, and the sounds of their children laughing in the yard filled the air with joy. It had been a whirlwind of a year, filled with new challenges and new joys. Life had settled into a rhythm that felt comfortable and right. Daniel continued his work at the clinic, while Sophia had become an integral part of the bakery's success, eventually becoming co-owner with Mrs. Bell. Their family had grown even closer, with Madison and Connor thriving in school and their younger siblings finding their own ways to shine. Despite the difficulties they had faced early on in Greenwood, Daniel and Sophia had found a place in the town that they now proudly called home. The community, which had once seemed hesitant and divided, had gradually opened up to them. Friendships deepened, and the once cold stares from some of the townspeople had softened into warm smiles and greetings. Sophia leaned her head against Daniel's shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her lips. "Can you believe it's been a year since the wedding?" she asked, her voice filled with awe. Daniel smiled, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and other times it feels like we've been together forever." Sophia chuckled softly. "Forever sounds good." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the children played a game of tag under the fading light. Madison was laughing, chasing after Connor, while their younger siblings squealed in delight as they darted around the yard. "It's amazing, isn't it?" Daniel mused, his eyes soft as he watched the scene before him. "How far we've come." Sophia nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "I never thought we'd get here. But now that we have, I can't imagine life any other way." The journey had been anything but easy, but the struggles they had faced had made their love and their family stronger. Sophia had learned to let go of the fear that had once held her back, while Daniel had found the courage to stand up for what mattered most to him. Together, they had built a life that was rooted in love, trust, and a sense of belonging. "I was thinking," Daniel said, breaking the silence, "maybe it's time we start planning that family trip we've been talking about." Sophia raised an eyebrow, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "Oh, and where exactly are we going?" Daniel shrugged, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "I don't know. Somewhere fun. Somewhere we can make new memories." Sophia laughed, her heart light. "I like the sound of that." They had always talked about taking a big family vacation, something to celebrate the life they had built together. And now, with the weight of their past struggles behind them, it felt like the perfect time to start dreaming of new adventures. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, casting a soft glow over the town of Greenwood, Sophia couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since she and Daniel had first met. She had been so afraid of opening her heart again, of letting someone in after years of guarding herself. But Daniel had shown her that love was worth the risk, and that true happiness came from being willing to embrace life flaws, challenges, and all. And now, as she sat beside the man she loved, surrounded by the laughter of their children, Sophia knew that she had found something rare and precious. She had found a love that endured. "Hey," Daniel said softly, his voice drawing her out of her thoughts. I love you." Sophia smiled, turning to look at him, her eyes shining with affection. "I love you too." They shared a kiss, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. It wasn't just a kiss of passion or romance, it was a promise. A promise that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, just as they always had. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, the children eventually tired out from their game of tag, collapsing onto the grass in fits of giggles. Daniel and Sophia stood up from the porch, walking over to gather their little ones, who were now sleepy-eyed and ready for bed. "Come on, you rascals," Daniel teased, scooping up the youngest in his arms. "Time to get ready for bed." Madison and Connor groaned playfully, but there were no real complaints. They followed their parents inside, their hearts full after a day well spent. Later that night, after tucking the kids in and settling into bed themselves, Daniel and Sophia lay side by side, their hands intertwined as they stared up at the ceiling. "You know," Daniel said after a long moment, "I never really thanked you." Sophia turned to him, a curious smile on her face. "For what?" "For giving us a chance," Daniel replied, his voice sincere. "For believing in us, even when it was hard." Sophia's heart warmed at his words. "You don't have to thank me, Daniel. We both fought for this." He smiled, leaning over to kiss her softly. "I know, but I just wanted you to know how grateful I am." Sophia kissed him back, her heart swelling with love. "And I'm grateful for you. Every single day." As they drifted off to sleep, their hands still clasped together, Sophia couldn't help but think about the future. There would be new challenges, new adventures, and new joys. But as long as they had each other, she knew they could handle anything. Because in the end, love was what truly mattered. It was what had brought them together, and it was what would carry them forward into a future that was as bright and beautiful as the stars above. As Daniel and Sophia's story ends, remember that love, resilience, and the power of family can help us overcome even the toughest challenges. If you've enjoyed following their journey and want more heartwarming stories filled with love, hope, and inspiration, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Your support means the world. Well, see you in the next story. The school's Diversity and Inclusion Office, created in the wake of the lawsuit, became a central hub for student-led initiatives aimed at promoting equity and addressing bias. One of the first major changes was the formation of a student advisory board, which included representatives from different racial, cultural, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Jasmine and Chloe were invited to join the board, and while they were initially hesitant, they saw it as an opportunity to help shape the future of Brookwood. The first meeting of the advisory board was filled with nervous energy as students from different grades and backgrounds gathered to discuss their visions for the school. Jasmine, who had always been more outspoken, took the lead, while Chloe offered her quiet but insightful input. "We need to make sure that the changes we're making aren't just on paper," Jasmine said during the meeting. "It's not enough to change the admissions process, we need to change the way people think. We need to create a culture where everyone feels like they belong, no matter who they are." The other students nodded in agreement, and soon the conversation flowed freely, with ideas for workshops, cultural events, and mentorship programs aimed at fostering understanding and unity within the student body. Under Emily's leadership, Brookwood also began reaching out to communities that had been historically underrepresented at the school. They partnered with local organizations to recruit students from diverse backgrounds and provided scholarships to ensure that financial barriers wouldn't prevent deserving students from attending. Emily herself worked tirelessly to rebuild trust within the Brookwood community. She held regular town hall meetings with parents and faculty, where she addressed concerns and shared updates on the school's progress. She made it clear that Brookwood was committed to becoming a leader in educational equity. And while some parents remained resistant, the majority embraced the changes. One afternoon, as Jasmine and Chloe were leaving school, they stopped to talk with Emily, who was walking across the campus. "You've both done so much to help make these changes happen," Emily said, her voice warm with admiration. "Brookwood is better because of you." Jasmine smiled, feeling a sense of pride. It wasn't just us. A lot of people fought to make this happen. True, Emily replied, but you were the spark that ignited the change. As Jasmine and Chloe walked away, they reflected on how far they had come. They had once felt like outsiders, unsure of their place at Brookwood, but now they were part of something much bigger, a movement toward a more just and inclusive future. While Brookwood Academy was undergoing a transformation, the Carter family was focused on rebuilding trust, both within their own family and in the community. The emotional toll of the lawsuit and the public scrutiny had been immense, but now that the battle was behind them, they were beginning to heal. Ethan and Vanessa, who had always been a strong team, took time to reconnect with each other and with their daughters. They made a conscious effort to spend more time together as a family, away from the pressures of their respective careers. Weekend trips, family dinners, and quiet evenings at home became a regular part of their routine. For Jasmine and Chloe, the process of rebuilding trust within themselves was more personal. The past year had tested their resilience, but it had also taught them important lessons about their own strength and the power of their voices. Jasmine, who had always felt the need to prove herself academically, began to let go of the idea that her worth was tied to her achievements. She realized that her place at Brookwood wasn't something she had to justify, it was something she had earned. She also started to explore her interests outside of academics, joining the school's debate team and getting involved in student government. Chloe, who had struggled with anxiety and self-doubt, found solace in her art. She began to use her creativity as an outlet for her emotions, expressing through painting and drawing what she couldn't always put into words. Her art teacher noticed her talent and encouraged her to showcase her work in the school's annual art exhibit. "I didn't think anyone would want to see my stuff," Chloe admitted one afternoon, as she showed her parents one of her latest paintings. Vanessa smiled, admiring the vibrant colors and intricate details of Chloe's work. "Your art is beautiful, Chloe. You have a gift, and the world deserves to see it." With her parents' encouragement, Chloe agreed to submit her work to the exhibit. On the day of the event, as students and parents wandered through the gallery, Chloe watched nervously from the sidelines, unsure of how her art would be received. But as people stopped to admire her paintings, offering compliments, and asking about her process, she felt a sense of validation she hadn't expected. One of the visitors to the exhibit was Professor Reynolds, the board member who had supported the changes at Brookwood. He paused in front of one of Chloe's paintings, studying it carefully. "This is remarkable," he said, turning to Chloe with a smile. "You have a real talent." Chloe blushed, feeling both proud and shy at the same time. "Thank you. It means a lot." As the evening went on, Chloe realized that she had found her place not just as a student at Brookwood, but as an artist with a voice of her own. The Carter family had been through a storm, but they had come out stronger on the other side. With the lawsuit behind them and Brookwood Academy on a new path, they were ready to focus on what mattered most to each other. One summer evening, the family gathered in their backyard for a barbecue, a tradition they had started before the chaos of the lawsuit had consumed their lives. The smell of grilled food filled the air as they laughed and talked, enjoying the simple pleasure of being together. Jasmine and Chloe sat on the patio, reminiscing about their first day at Brookwood and how much had changed since then. "I never thought we'd get through all of that," Jasmine said, sipping lemonade. "But here we are." Chloe nodded, her eyes softening. "I'm glad we didn't give up. It was hard, but we made it." Ethan joined them, holding a plate of burgers and hot dogs. He smiled at his daughters, pride radiating from him. "You two are the strongest people I know. You fought for what was right, and you made a difference." Vanessa, carrying a bowl of salad, sat down beside Ethan. She placed a hand on his arm, her expression filled with love and gratitude. "We all made a difference, and we did it together." As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the backyard, the Carters sat around the table eating and laughing. The weight of the past year finally lifted. They knew that there would always be challenges ahead, but they were ready to face them together. That night, as Jasmine and Chloe sat outside, looking up at the stars, they reflected on how far they had come. They had been tested in ways they never could have imagined, but they had emerged stronger, more confident, and more certain of their place in the world. "I think we're going to be okay," Chloe said softly, her gaze fixed on the sky. Jasmine smiled, her heart full. "Yeah, we're going to be just fine." Months after the lawsuit had ended, the Carter family continued to move forward, both personally and professionally. Ethan's proposed bill on educational reform was gaining momentum in Congress, with support from lawmakers across the political spectrum. The bill aimed to establish nationwide guidelines for private school admissions, ensuring that no student would be discriminated against based on race, socioeconomic status, or background. On the day of the vote, Ethan stood in the Senate chamber, addressing his colleagues with the same passion that had driven him throughout the Brookwood case. "This bill is about fairness," he said, his voice steady but powerful. "It's about giving every child a fair shot at success. It's about ensuring that no student is ever told they don't belong because of the color of their skin. We've come a long way, but we still have work to do. And it starts here, with this bill." As the vote was cast, the bill passed with overwhelming support, marking a major victory in the fight for educational equity. Ethan, standing in the Senate chamber, allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. The fight was far from over, but this was a step in the right direction. Meanwhile, Vanessa continued to work on cases related to racial discrimination, using her platform to advocate for families facing similar challenges. She became a mentor to young lawyers, sharing her knowledge and experience to help them navigate the complexities of civil rights law. For Jasmine and Chloe, life at Brookwood had settled into a new normal. They continued to thrive academically, but they also made time for the things they loved: debating, painting, and building friendships with students from all walks of life. One afternoon, as the sisters sat in the school library, Chloe looked up from her sketchbook and smiled at Jasmine. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't fought back?" Chloe asked. Jasmine thought for a moment, then shook her head. "I don't like to think about that. What matters is that we did fight, and because of that, everything changed." Chloe nodded, her eyes bright with determination. "We should be proud of that." "We are," Jasmine said, her voice filled with certainty. "We made a difference." As the sisters packed up their things and headed out of the library, they knew that their fight had been worth it. They had faced adversity and come out stronger, and they had helped pave the way for a future where every student, regardless of race or background, could walk through the doors of opportunity with their head held high. The road ahead was long, but the Carters were ready for it. Thank you so much for following the Carter family's journey to justice and equality. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about powerful narratives that challenge society, inspire change, and explore the human experience, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss out on new content. Together, we can continue to share stories that matter. See you in the next one. "The police are on their way, Derek. You've lost." Derek's eyes darted around, realizing for the first time that the entire street was watching him. His bravado faltered, his shoulders tensing as he took in the growing crowd of neighbors, all standing together in a show of solidarity. For a moment, it seemed like Derek might lash out, might do something reckless. But then slowly, the fight drained out of him. His fists unclenched, his shoulders slumped, and with one last look at Edith filled with hatred and resentment, he turned and stormed back to his car. The street was silent as Derek sped away, his tires screeching against the pavement. Edith's breath came in shallow gasps, her heart still racing from the confrontation. She stood there for a moment, frozen, until Bill crossed the street and stood beside her. "You okay, Edith?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Edith nodded, though her legs still felt shaky. "I'm okay," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thanks to all of you." Bill smiled warmly, giving her a reassuring nod. "We're not going to let him hurt you, Edith. Not now, not ever." Edith's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of fear, they were tears of gratitude. She had been afraid for so long, but now, standing here with her neighbors by her side, she felt a renewed sense of strength. She wasn't alone. In the days following the final confrontation with Derek, the neighborhood watch remained vigilant, but the sense of fear that had once gripped Cedar Street began to dissipate. Derek hadn't returned, and Edith had received word from the police that he was being closely monitored. They had issued a restraining order, preventing Derek from coming within a certain distance of Edith's home or the shelter where Rachel and the girls were staying. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was enough to give Edith peace of mind for now. Rachel called regularly, checking in to see how Edith was doing and updating her on their progress. The shelter had helped her find legal representation, and she was working towards securing full custody of the girls and filing for divorce from Derek. It was a long, difficult road, but Rachel was determined to keep moving forward. "The girls are adjusting," Rachel said during one phone call, her voice sounding stronger, more confident. "They're starting to sleep better, and we're getting used to our new routine. It's still hard sometimes, but I feel like we're finally free." Edith smiled, her heart swelling with pride for Rachel. She had come so far, and though there were still challenges ahead, Edith knew that Rachel had the strength to face them. "I'm so proud of you," Edith said softly. "You're doing such a good job, Rachel. You and the girls are going to be just fine." Rachel hesitated for a moment, then her voice softened. "We couldn't have done it without you, Edith. You saved us. I'll never be able to thank you enough for everything you've done." Tears welled in Edith's eyes, and she wiped them away with a smile. "You're family now, Rachel, and family takes care of each other." As Edith hung up the phone, a sense of calm settled over her. She had faced her fears, stood up to Derek, and helped Rachel and the girls escape a dangerous situation. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Her home, once a place of quiet solitude, had become a symbol of strength and resilience. And her neighbors' sons, strangers, had become a community, united by a shared sense of purpose. Life on Cedar Street would never be the same again, but that was okay. Because now it is filled with hope, connection, and the promise of a better future. Edith smiled as she stepped out into her garden, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow over the roses. She knelt down, her hands gently tending to the flowers, feeling the cool earth beneath her fingertips. There was still work to be done, but now she knew she wasn't doing it alone. In the weeks that followed Derek's final confrontation, a new sense of peace settled over Cedar Street. The neighborhood watch remained vigilant, but the need for constant worry had lessened as Derek's presence faded from their lives. He hadn't returned, and the restraining order kept him at a safe distance from Edith's home and from the shelter where Rachel and the girls were living. Edith found herself breathing easier with each passing day, the weight of fear slowly lifting from her shoulders. One crisp autumn morning, as Edith was pruning her roses, she heard the familiar ring of her phone from inside the house. She wiped her hands on her gardening apron and hurried to answer it, her heart lifting when she saw Rachel's name on the caller ID. "Rachel, it's so good to hear from you," Edith said, a smile spreading across her face as she held the phone to her ear. "Hi, Edith," Rachel replied, her voice filled with warmth. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Not at all, dear. Just tending to the garden. How are you and the girls doing?" Rachel let out a small sigh, though it was one of relief rather than stress. "We're doing really well, actually. The girls are starting to settle in at school, and they're making new friends. We've been staying at the shelter for a while now, but I've been working with a caseworker. And, well, we found a place. It's a small apartment, but it's ours." Edith's heart swelled with joy at the news. "Rachel, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you. I couldn't have done it without your help, Edith." "Really? I mean it. You were there for me when I didn't know what to do. I'll never be able to thank you enough." "You've already thanked me more than enough, Rachel," Edith said gently. "I'm just glad you and the girls are safe and moving forward." "We are," Rachel agreed, her voice steady. "We still have some hard days, but we're starting to rebuild. I'm learning how to live without looking over my shoulder all the time. The girls, they've been through so much, but I think they're going to be okay." Edith felt a tear slip down her cheek, and she wiped it away with a smile. "You're an incredible mother, Rachel. You've given them the chance to have a better life, and that's the most important thing." "Thank you," Rachel whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I wanted to ask, would you like to come visit us when we're settled into the apartment? The girls miss you, and I'd love for you to see our new place." "I'd love that," Edith replied without hesitation. "I can't wait to see how far you've come." After they said their goodbyes, Edith stood in the quiet of her kitchen, a deep sense of pride and peace settling over her. She had been part of something important, helping Rachel and her daughters escape a dangerous situation and start a new life. Knowing that they were safe and thriving gave Edith a sense of fulfillment she hadn't felt in a long time. But Edith also knew that healing wasn't just for Rachel and the girls. She too had been deeply affected by everything that had happened. For so long, Edith had lived in a world of solitude, wrapped in the memories of her past life with Richard. But now she realized that she had the power to create new connections, to make a difference in the lives of others. Her small, quiet world had expanded in ways she never could have predicted. A few weeks later, Edith stood in front of the door to Rachel's new apartment, her heart racing with anticipation. She held a basket filled with homemade cookies and a small potted plant, a housewarming gift for Rachel and the girls. As she knocked on the door, she couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and pride. Rachel had taken such brave steps toward building a new life for herself and her daughters, and Edith was eager to see the progress they had made. The door opened, and there stood Rachel, her face lighting up with a wide smile. "Edith, you made it." "Of course I did," Edith replied warmly, stepping inside and hugging Rachel. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." The apartment was small but cozy, filled with the warmth and light that Edith had come to associate with Rachel. The walls were adorned with colorful artwork, some drawn by Lily and Ivy, and the space felt alive with the energy of a family building something new. Edith smiled as she took it all in, her heart swelling with pride for Rachel's resilience. "Look who's here!" Rachel called out. And moments later, Lily and Ivy came bounding into the room, their faces bright with excitement. "Grandma Edith!" they exclaimed in unison, rushing toward her and wrapping their arms around her. Edith laughed, bending down to hug the girls. "Oh, my dears, it's so good to see you." "We missed you," Ivy said, her voice small but filled with warmth. "Can you stay for dinner?" "I wouldn't dream of leaving before dinner," Edith replied, her heart swelling with affection for the girls. As they settled into the living room, Rachel brought out a pot of tea, and the four of them spent the afternoon catching up, laughing, and sharing stories. The girls proudly showed Edith their artwork, and Rachel talked about how they were adjusting to their new school and making friends. "They're doing so well," Rachel said, her voice filled with relief and pride. "I wasn't sure how they would handle all the changes, but they've been so strong. I'm so proud of them." "You should be proud of yourself too," Edith said gently. "You've created a safe, loving home for them. That's everything." Rachel smiled, her eyes glistening with tears of gratitude. "I still can't believe we made it. There were times when I thought we'd never get out, but now we have a chance at a real life." As the afternoon turned into evening, the conversation grew deeper, and Edith and Rachel found themselves reflecting on everything that had happened over the past few months. There had been so much pain, fear, and uncertainty, but now there was also hope. They had made it through the storm, and now they were standing on the other side, ready to rebuild their lives. "I never thought I'd feel free," Rachel admitted quietly, her voice heavy with emotion. "But now I wake up every morning knowing that I'm safe, that my girls are safe. And that's everything." Edith reached out and took Rachel's hand, squeezing it gently. "You deserve this peace, Rachel. You and the girls deserve all the happiness in the world." Rachel nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. "And you deserve it too, Edith. You've been through so much yourself. You've given us a new start, and I hope you know how much that means to me." Edith smiled, her heart full. "We've given each other a new start." Later that evening, after dinner, and one last round of hugs from Lily and Ivy, Edith said her goodbyes and made her way back to her own home. As she walked down the quiet street, she felt a deep sense of contentment. Life had changed in ways she never could have predicted, but it was better, now richer, fuller, and filled with new connections. Rachel and the girls had become like family to her, and Edith knew that their bond would only grow stronger as they continued to support one another in the days ahead. As the autumn leaves began to fall and the air turned crisp, Edith found herself spending more time in her garden, reflecting on the past few months. So much had changed, not just for Rachel and the girls, but for Edith as well. Her life, once quiet and isolated, had been transformed by the relationships she had built and the strength she had discovered within herself. But with that transformation came a deeper understanding of the weight she had been carrying for so long: grief, the loneliness, the sense of being left behind. Richard's death had left a hole in Edith's life, one that she had tried to fill with routine and solitude. But now, with Rachel and the girls in her life, Edith realized that she didn't have to carry that weight alone anymore. One afternoon, as Edith sat in the garden with a cup of tea, she found herself thinking about Richard. She missed him every day, missed his laugh, his warmth, the way he had always made her feel safe and loved. But for the first time in a long time, Edith felt a sense of peace when she thought of him, peace in knowing that he would have been proud of her for everything she had done to help Rachel and the girls. As she sipped her tea, Edith decided it was time to visit Richard's grave. She hadn't been in a while, and she felt a strong pull to go to tell him about everything that had happened, about the new life she had found after all these years. The next day, Edith drove to the cemetery where Richard was buried. The drive was quiet, the fall colors painting the landscape in shades of gold and red. When she arrived, Edith made her way to Richard's headstone, a small smile on her face as she placed a bouquet of fresh roses at his grave. "Hello, love," she said softly, her voice filled with affection. "It's been a while, but I've been busy. I have so much to tell you." For the next hour, Edith sat by Richard's grave, telling him about Rachel, about the girls, about everything that had happened since they had moved into the neighborhood. She talked about how she had found new strength within herself, how she had made new friends, and how she had learned that it was never too late to make a difference in someone's life. "I think you'd be proud of me," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I know I've still got a lot of life left to live, and I'm going to make the most of it. I'll carry your love with me, always." As Edith stood to leave, she felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. She knew that Richard was still with her, in spirit, and that his love would continue to guide her in the days ahead. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. As the winter holidays approached, Cedar Street came alive with the warm glow of twinkling lights and the festive spirit of the season. Edith, who had once dreaded the long, lonely winter months, now found herself filled with a sense of anticipation and joy. The neighborhood had changed so much in the past few months, and Edith felt more connected to her community than ever before. Rachel and the girls had invited Edith to spend Christmas with them in their new apartment, and Edith had gladly accepted. It was a far cry from the quiet, solitary holidays she had spent in years past, and she was looking forward to celebrating with people she cared about. On Christmas Eve, Edith arrived at Rachel's apartment with a basket full of gifts and homemade treats. The girls greeted her at the door, their faces bright with excitement, and Edith couldn't help but laugh as they pulled her inside. "We've been waiting for you," Lily exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with joy. Mom made hot chocolate. Edith's heart swelled with affection as she followed the girls into the cozy living room where Rachel was waiting with a warm smile. The apartment was decorated with twinkling lights and a small Christmas tree, and the air was filled with the comforting scent of cinnamon and pine. "Welcome, Edith," Rachel said, hugging her tightly. "We're so glad you're here." "I wouldn't want to be anywhere else," Edith replied, her voice full of warmth. As they sat together by the fire, sipping hot chocolate and exchanging stories, Edith felt a deep sense of contentment. This was what she had been missing for so long, a sense of connection, of belonging, of family. The evening passed in a blur of laughter, conversation, and warmth. The girls opened their presents with wide-eyed excitement, and Edith marveled at how far they had come since the dark days of living under Derek's control. They were happy, healthy, and full of life, and Edith knew that Rachel had done an incredible job of creating a safe, loving home for them. Later that night, after the girls had gone to bed, Rachel and Edith sat together by the fire, reflecting on everything that had happened over the past year. It feels like a lifetime ago, Rachel said quietly, her eyes focused on the flickering flames. Sometimes I still can't believe we made it out. But we did. You did, Edith corrected gently. You found the strength to leave, and now you and the girls have a bright future ahead of you. Rachel smiled, her eyes glistening with gratitude. I couldn't have done it without you, Edith. You were there when I needed someone the most, and I'll never forget that. Edith reached out and took Rachel's hand, squeezing it gently. We've been there for each other, and we'll keep being there, no matter what comes next. As they sat together in the quiet of the night, Edith felt a deep sense of peace settling over her. The storm was over, and now it was time to move forward to embrace the future with open arms, knowing that they had all found the strength to survive and thrive. And in that moment, Edith knew that everything would be all right. Thank you for following along with Edith's emotional and inspiring journey. If you found this story moving or relatable, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more powerful stories like this. We'll be bringing you more heartwarming tales of resilience, community, and the strength of the human spirit. And don't forget to click the notification bell so you'll always be the first to know when new content is available. We value your feedback, so if you enjoyed this story, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community, and stay tuned for more stories that remind us all that no matter how hard things get, we are never truly alone.